Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
One of my favorite segments of any week is when we talk HR with HRMAB. And joining us today, because we want to look at a very important subject, is Khadija Moore, who is an organizational development strategist, but the founder and managing director of Dijitalised. And look at that face right there, that smiling face of Joan Underwood, the president of HRMAB indeed. Good morning, ladies. Welcome.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
You stole my thunder. I wanted to say that first. Happy New Year, indeed. Good to see both of you, indeed. We're looking today, though, Joan, at a very important subject, strategic HR for business impact. And so when we're talking about that, if all is about HR, so talk to me when we talk about that, what we're talking about.
All right. So with strategic HR, we have a longer term orientation and perspective. What's most popular when we think about HR is the operational aspect in terms of the day-to-day dealing with the administrative functions. However, both are equally important. We need to take care of the day-to-day, but we also need to have our eye on the horizon, on the organization vision and mission, its business objectives, and how the human resources within the organization, the people within the organization, need to be deployed in order to help to achieve those objectives.
So HR looks at the people. The organization looks at the business aspect as well. So, but the two must combine. They're not necessarily exclusive to each other. So how do we do that really and truly? How do we keep our eyes on each and at the same time on it? How do we do that?
Well, the thing is, we cannot achieve the business objectives. We cannot realize the impact that we want to have without the people. So the people have to be part and parcel. It's not the people or the business impact. Is how do we engage our people and ensure that we have the right people with the right skills, knowledge, abilities, in the right processes, with the right equipment, etc., to achieve the business impact. So the two are inextricably linked. And if we ignore one in favor of the other, ultimately the organization is going to be placed in jeopardy. And again, the people who suffer as a result of that, because they lose security of tenure is if the business does not maintain its competitive advantage. And even in nonprofits, if we think of the public sector, government has an agenda, a national agenda in terms of what it wants to accomplish, and this must be accomplished through the people.
Indeed, so that's why you must have an HR strategy. Khadija, this is where I come to you now as an organizational development strategist, developing the organization, developing the people. Why is it important to have an HR strategy that is separate from the overall business strategy, if at all?
So much to what Joan was spoken to just now, HR is not going to have a strategy that is absolutely separate from the business itself. The strategy and HR strategy can sit within the vacuum. So it's really, the two are inextricably linked, as she said. And it's real, we exist to support the organization through service to the people within the organization. But if you look at what strategy is and you really take it at its core, it's essentially a plan of action to achieve a goal. And businesses all have goals that they seek to achieve, and the units within the business contribute in some way to helping that business achieve its goal. So to do this, you really should have a plan of action in place. So stepping away from HR, because sometimes that's a little bit more difficult to relate to. When you look at something like customer service, they may support the business in reaching its goals, excuse me, through the retention of customers. And to do that, they'll have a plan of action in place that speaks to things like greeting customers or storing the information of their customers. All of that is in place so the business can reach their goal. And HR is very much no different. Okay, so we also need to have a plan of action to ensure that we support the business in achieving its goals. So again, taking retention, do we need to retain employees more effectively? And then what are the processes that we'll have in place, whether it be a robust engagement plan, compensation and benefits, etc., to ensure that we support the business in reaching their goals. So all of that to say that it's really necessary for HR to have a strategy because the HR strategy is that plan of action for how we are going to meaningfully contribute to the business and create that impact that Joan was just speaking to as well.
I know a lot of HR practitioners they watch this segment in particular. This is really quite a very interesting segment. So give us some insight as to what are some of the important things, the elements that need to go into that HR strategy to be a very successful strategy.
Of course, and there are endless elements, but I'll give you a few. So first, let's start externally. Let's look beyond the company. You want to have an idea of what are some of the existing market conditions. These are things that are going to impact and influence and really inform your HR strategy. Looking within the company itself, you want to make sure you have a deep understanding of the business strategy. And you also want to ensure that you have some executive support so that your HR strategy can indeed be successful. Then when you come internally to the HR department, you want to have an idea of what are your priorities are. And to determine your priorities, you may look at things like, do I want to get the biggest bang for my buck here? Or do I perhaps want to mitigate some risk that I'm seeing, whether it be internally or externally? And then two other things you want to consider is effective change management. And then last of all, but by no means least, you want to have some form of metrics in place. Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that is how you help to demonstrate that impact to the business.
Right there, because it's very well to come to you, Joan. You know, oftentimes you've said HR needs to be in the C-suite. They need to be there as part of the decision making as well. So with the focus now on business impact, how can HR professionals adequately contribute? Because, you know, as Khadija would have said, the metrics. How important is it then that HR practitioners do have those metrics in place so that they can adequately present a plan that says, hold on, this is where we're failing, this is how we can succeed, this is where the curve is, and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Well, HR needs to be able to speak the language of business. And the language of business is data, it's finance, it's quantitatively being able to communicate with decision makers so that they can realize what impact variables are having on the performance of the business. And so, you know, based on what is traditionally taught in a course of study around HR, we do not necessarily come out from our formal training programs or academic programs with a sufficiently thorough understanding of proficiency in business and in speaking the language of business. And that's why, and this is breaking news now for you, Pearson, HRMAB is going to be on March 16th and 17th having a boot camp, and it's called the HRMAB Strategic Business Partner Boot Camp. Now, Pearson, when you hear the word boot camp, what comes to mind for you?
Someone who's going to be barking at me to change my behavior, to whip me into action, so to speak, to get me right.
Okay, so without the barking, we're defining boot camp as a really intensive, practical program of training and development. And Khadija, I would like to introduce you to her now in a new capacity, because Khadija is going to be a champion during our boot camp. And the pillar which she will be taking us through in a very practical way, so that by the time our participants come out of this boot camp experience, they're going to have a framework that they can begin to use immediately in her pillar. And it should come as no surprise that her pillar is aligning HR and business strategies. So that's just one of the pillars. We have three additional pillars, which we've already alluded to. One is mastering the numbers, and we're referring to finance and data analytics. I'm not going to announce the champion of that one yet, because we're having a formal media launch tomorrow morning, and then we will reveal the three other champions for the three other pillars. So 2 pillars so far, aligning HR and business strategies, mastering the numbers, finance and data analytics. Then, of course, we cannot talk about HR being a strategic business partner without talking about employment law. So we actually have a 2-phased approach to this pillar, because we're going to deal with our domestic legal and regulatory environment, and then we're going to look regionally and internationally. And then finally, change. 50 to 70% of change initiatives fail, according to the published data by McKinsey. And the primary reason why this happens is not because the change in terms of the project management or the technical specs were flawed, but because sufficient attention wasn't paid to the people side of change. And so our pillar champion for change management is going to be focusing on how you successfully lead the people through a change initiative. So that's coming up in March. The launch is tomorrow, and we have some really exciting news to share in terms of the partnerships that HR has forged to bring this to the Barbadian people.
See, now I feel as if I should be an HR practitioner myself because it sounds so exciting. But for those of you watching who are HR practitioners indeed, but you may not yet be a member of HRMAB, it is important that you do join. You do really, really join. HRMAB.org.bb, that's the website. Go to it now, and membership, as I always say, brings benefits to what you experience there with HRMAB as well. You get to benefit from the experience of the two people we see on the screen and many others who have years and years and vast knowledge in human resource practice as well. But look for that and a whole lot more. So Joan and Khadija, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope we've got sufficient appetite for people to get to know more about the strategic HR for business impact, how they're both linked, and how it's so important for HR practitioners to get to know the details about the metrics and come to the table really with information and not just supposition. So I want to thank both of you. I look forward to much more, and I really want to encourage as many of them as possible to get onto the website, to become a member, but to sign up for the bootcamp that's coming up. And Joan, by the way, for those watching as well, how can they register for the bootcamp? Or you'll give those details tomorrow?
Exactly. We're going to be at the media launch tomorrow. We'll give you all the registration details.
How did I know you were going to say that? How did I know? Thank you so much, ladies, and all the best indeed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Talking HR with HRMAB every Wednesday morning right here. We're back, the first edition for the year 2023, looking at strategic HR for business impact. Go to the website to get to know a whole lot more.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.